Hello, and welcome to another edition of Ask the Professor, where we respond to your questions on first principles of political philosophy, on the course of history, on the mess we're in today, on culture and its relationship to public affairs, all those things that matter to us in our efforts to build a decent society. And if you want to support this work, please go to www.johnrobson.ca and make a monthly pledge.
All right, here's a question from Andrew, who's asking about U.S. politics, and he says he's repeatedly heard from educated and informed people that Barack Obama was prevented from being effective in many ways by an uncooperative Congress. And he's asking, essentially, in your view, as the Republican-dominated Congress the last few years has been unreasonably uncooperative, strictly for partisan reasons, without thinking about the best interests of the country, or is this maybe an exaggeration?
I think, first of all, if it is true that Congress has obstructed the president, 3 cheers for the American political system, because it was not designed to create a political juggernaut. Quite the reverse. It was designed to balance ambition against ambition in order to prevent the state from doing things to you. And we have had cases in the past, certainly, where a Democratic Congress frustrated a Republican president. We have had cases, for instance, Jimmy Carter, where a Democratic Congress frustrated a Democratic president, and vice versa.
And this may happen again.
That a lot of things didn't happen under Barack Obama because he didn't have the support of Congress. But he didn't have it in part because he was a very divisive, abrasive, condescending figure who, from the word go, insisted that compromise meant everybody did what he said. And I saw an interview with him fairly recently where asking about whether he regretted this kind of deadlock, and he said it really was too bad. But, his opponents just weren't able to come to the table and do as he told them for reasons to do with their obnoxious constituents. And that was a classic Obama assessment of what was wrong. And you also see with Obama that a number of times that he tried to do through executive action things that he was unable to get through the legislative process. And I find this funny because my academic specialty is actually Richard Nixon. And Nixon was accused at the time by a lot of people of being an imperial president, that the executive branch had become too strong and Congress too weak. And of course, Nixon faced enormous hostile Democratic majorities on a great many issues, except those on which Nixon was himself actually liberal in the modern sense of that word. But it's curious how someone like Barack Obama, who was meant to be a constitutional scholar, wasn't even slightly worried about what a lot of people viewed as usurpation, just thinking that he could do things by executive order, which the courts repeatedly rebuked him on. His job was to work with Congress and with the American people to get support for these measures, instead of trying to ram them through one after another and increasingly inflaming the sentiments of Congress. On the other hand, it is fair to say that whereas Barack Obama had a clear plan to make government bigger, which in my view is lunacy. I do not see how you can look at the United States today or Canada or any other Western nation and say the problem is too little government. But he did so did many of his voters and his own side in Congress. But the Republicans knew government had to be made smaller, and they had no idea how to make it smaller. The Republican Congress did not perform very effectively. It was a great disappointment, I think, to everybody, including, I imagine, its own members, who understood that they were going in circles, often firing inwards as they did so. But here's an interesting point to bear in mind. Barack Obama, the polls say, is enormously popular. And I think that, he has a lot of genuine support, but there are also people who won't tell a pollster they didn't like his performance because they don't want to sound like a bigot. But in the 2014 off-year elections, the Republican Party in the House, in the Senate, and at the state level, the governorships and state legislatures, achieved a degree of success they had not seen since the Great Depression dumped Herbert Hoover out of the White House and made them the minority party for 3 generations. This was a result of popular frustration with the way the country was going, and Barack Obama never understood that. He might have dropped his G's to seem folksy, but he was as condescending. He always looked to me like he was lecturing a singularly dim class of community college students when he felt that he should be at the Ivy League. And that was part of his contribution, along with his inflexible vision of big government, that aroused opposition, not just from Republicans in Congress, but from the body politic and the citizens, because the United States Constitution was written to allow opposition to a government that got too big for its britches. And the Barack Obama executive branch had ambitions that were wrong, that were outsized, and that were incompatible with liberty. So he brought this trouble on himself by the way he did things and by the things that he did. And frankly, I hope that this Republican Congress, which is almost as Republican now as it was, the Republicans did very well in the 2016 elections with a lot of seats to defend, and the Democrats better look out in 2018. But I hope this Congress will be an effective check on President Donald Trump, who I think has a lot of bad ideas.
Yeah.
If it's possible to dignify those things that go rattling around in his head and then come shooting out his mouth with the term ideas. So yes, the separation of powers and a deadlock between the legislature and the executive is a good thing. An even better thing would be for government to get smaller as a result, but one step at a time.
And I know you don't watch yourself House of Cards, but if people have been watching House of Cards, you would know that I like the portrayal of the work between and the back and forth between the presidency and Congress, always trying to get the support of Congress people in order to pass any kind of legislative agenda item. This is what Frank Underwood was doing the whole way. And you could really see the power balance or imbalance sometimes between the two branches of government. And this is one good place, one good way I think that this series is done to help educate people about how it works.
Yeah, and Underwood is a sinister character, but the work that he does is essential. Lyndon Johnson was very good at it. Barack Obama scorned to undertake it. Apparently, early on with his first budget, when he did have Democratic Congress, he met with Republicans, and they had a few suggestions and requests, and he said, hey, I won, get used to it. And when they won, it boomeranged.
Right.
Actually, that's not true. Boomerangs don't come back. You know what's the thing about boomerangs, why they're shaped the way they are, is they fly long and straight and hit your prey. But the metaphor is ineradicable from our language, so I'll say it boomeranged.
All right, then. Thanks. Folks, if you would like to play along and ask your question of the professor, then you go to the URL on your screen, and it will explain everything about how to proceed. Thanks, and see you next time.